Well, emails that show they knew the investment was bad, but pushed it off on investors anyway. Investors meaning us. This isn't Enron we're talking about or financial meltdown. That's exactly what happened with Solyndra, and the taxpayers were the investors. So if this was a private company instead of the White House, would the same administration actually be pursuing charges? Let's ask former Enron prosecutor John Houston and former federal prosecutor and Fox News contributor Lise Wheel. Well, at least we know how this administration loves to sue people. It's an administration made up of lawyers, so of course they love to sue. Would they be suing if this was in the private sector?
Yes, suing. That assumes a civil lawsuit. Yeah. But I was thinking you were talking about criminal. I mean,
there are grounds for criminal prosecution.
The FBI has already been there and done the investigation or done the search, right? You can't get a warrant from a federal judge unless you have probable cause to suspect criminal activity and that you're going to find fruits of criminal activity there. Okay, so that's what they thought. I don't know what they have, obviously, when they got in there. But let's assume.
And you don't know what they're looking for.
And I don't know what they're looking for, and I don't know if it's just for the company or if it's also ties to the White House and their criminal liability.
Well, John, let's look at those or explore the issue of ties to the White House. We do have an email, thanks to the work of reporters, from former Chief of Staff to Joe Biden saying, and I'm quoting from this email now, "Can we chat on Monday about the DOE flag here on Solyndra?" DOE meaning Department of Energy, which of course funded Solyndra. "If you guys think this is a bad idea, I need to unwind the West Wing quickly." That implies, John, that the West Wing somehow was wound into this Solyndra thing, no?
Well, what it means is the West Wing and Joe Biden had a date set for initiating the whole process, the program in California. But I think, importantly, the answer to those emails was that Biden staff inquired of OMB, is there a problem here? And they answered saying, there are some problems, but they're resolvable. So the problem here, if there's somebody trying to find a criminal case, you want to be able to grab onto something that would have been a clear sign that the White House was interfering, cutting off, or shortcutting, or otherwise changing the due diligence process.
Right.
And there's no evidence to date yet
that
has happened.
Well, you admit that there are problems, or they admit that there were problems. I want to know what those problems are. It's my money that was wasted. I deserve to know what those problems were. I want to know how they were wound around Solyndra, Lise.
Right. And look, I'll tell you, the first thing is that when Solyndra's people are brought up for charges, if that happens, the first thing that they're going to do, those executives are going to say, you know, it really wasn't us. We were enticed, or we were certainly helped by the White House. The White House then would become accomplices, and you have everyone turning on each other.
And, John, at the very least, shouldn't we know a little bit more about the visits to the White House by the private sector investor in Solyndra, the guy who's going to be paid off before taxpayers in the case of it going bankrupt? I mean, there was some kind of very special deal that he made, perhaps in somehow relation to his connections to the White House, that other corporate board members don't make.
Well, that's an inquiry worth making, but I want to answer the other point. First, even through testimony today, there's no one standing up saying that the review of the loans would have turned out any differently had there been any more time. There's nothing there with respect to that.
Yes, there is.
Now,
Hold on, John, forget.
Answer the other point. First, even through testimony today, there's no one standing up saying that the review of the loans would have turned out any differently had there been any more time. There's nothing there with respect to that.
Yes, there is.
Now,
hold on, John, forgive. No, because you said something that wasn't true.
Were there problems with the company?
The answer is yes,
of course. Hold on, let me finish. The answer is yes, of course there were problems with the company. As with most of the companies coming up for review, this was, by the very definition, risky business that needed public money in order to move forward
John, you've gone on enough because you said
basis.
something that wasn't exactly true, which is that there were no indications that there were problems. We had T.J. Rogers on yesterday. T.J. Rogers has investments in solar firms. He said there were enough indicators in Solyndra to withhold, if it was a private sector loan, to withhold some of those loan guarantees until they resolved those issues. Right. These issues were not resolved. They did get special treatment, Lise.
And yet they still had the loan. I mean, that's the thing.
Right.
So if you have all these things,
there are judgment calls. People were making
Hold on, John, you had your chance. Go ahead.
Judgment calls on the loans.
Hold on. Go ahead, Lise.
You have all of these indicators that there's a problem with Solyndra, and they still get this loan, and it's pushed, not just get it, they get the first one that's given, and it's pushed through quickly, with Kaiser being there, the bundler, by the way, for Obama. These are all things that you have to put together, and a criminal investigator will look at, a grand jury will look at it, and the subpoenas will be issued.
John, 15 seconds, last word. Go ahead.
Yeah, the answer is, of course, they're going to look at that. But with the evidence that has come up to date, there's absolutely no evidence that the due diligence done, which was on a shorter timeline, which did identify risks, would wind up any differently. At the end of the day, they weighed the risks and decided they would go forward.
No,
and
we know people in the
didn't have a
business.
hand in
We know
changing
people
it.
in the business who question the loan, who question the
Right.
continued drawdown of
That's
this
Monday
loan,
morning
despite
quarterbacking.
questions
Monday
not being
morning
answered by
Was there
Solyndra.
undue pressure? Was there
At the
undue
very least,
pressure?
John, you're in favor of continuing the investigation, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay,
In
all
favor
right.
of continuing it, but I'm not in favor of crediting Monday morning quarterbacks.
No, we'll see
to
what
find out.
happens. This is the beginning. It's an investigation, and then we go on from there.
Absolutely.
John Houston, Lee Sweal, good to